Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. This week, things are a little calmer than they have been in recent weeks. Standard is starting to slow down a little bit as the format is beginning to solidify. Although I do anticipate some more upheaval coming up because this weekend is the return of Standard GPs. There's going to be a lot of eyes on those deck lists, especially anything that makes it to the top 8. But we do have some ripple effects still from last weekend's Star City Games Dallas. There was a Standard Classic there, as well as a Modern Open and Modern Classic. And there are definitely some price trends because of those events. Commander's a little slower this week. We do have a couple cards to look at, and we are going to look at some vintage Magic as well. But quickly before we get started, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here at the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon down below. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that initial link, no matter what it is, we'll get a small percentage. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save some cash while you support the channel. And they do have pre-orders right now for guild kits, and they also have some new playmats, which are classic art playmats you might want to check out. They have a lot of cool stuff there. Thank you, as always, not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. Y'all make the channel what it is. But let's get into it. Let's begin, as we always do, with Standard and the top 5 Standard legal cards that have lost value this week. Number 5, Tezzeret Artifice Master, down 86 cents to $6.68. So we talk about this card every week, and it goes down every week, and it's still going to keep going down, at least for a few more weeks. I have no doubt at this point. There's just not a home for this card. It never really found a foothold in Modern or Legacy. And when it comes to Standard, especially with the loss of the Kaladesh block, there's just no cards that interact extremely well with it right now. Number 4, Nexus of Fate, goes down $1.07 to $17.97. I have seen a few control decks trying to run a copy or two of this, especially Is It Control typically. However, that's not the same as running 4 copies in Turbo Fog, which we saw in the last meta, which caused this card to get pretty hot for a short period of time. Now, there are some Turbo Fog decks sometimes you'll see in Modern. They haven't really caught on, but those typically run just 1 copy of this, unlike the standard version that ran 4. I do think this does continue to go down. Number 3, Karn Scion of Urza, down $1.31 to $27. Now, Karn is not going down because he's not seeing play. He's actually seeing a lot of play. In Standard, right now, he's more of a sideboard card, so maybe he's not getting the spotlight, but he is showing up sometimes 1, 2, or even 3 copies out of the board of some pretty important decks, and we saw that as recently as last weekend as the Star City Games Classic. Modern, we know this is in big decks, for example, Affinity, Hardened Scales Affinity. In Legacy, many of the Eldrazi builds are running this. We've seen Mono Red Prison running it in the past. So Karn's not going anywhere. But not only were a lot of packs of Dominaria open, but early on, people knew this was a good card. It wasn't a surprise. So your serious players, they ran out and scrambled to get their play sets right away. And that's why you're seeing not as many people trying to pick up this card right now in comparison to a few months back. Over time, this will go down a little more, finally stabilize maybe closer to the $22 to $25 mark. And then long term, it will slowly creep up. I have no doubt in a few years, this will be one of those $50, $60 cards. Number 2 is Banefire. This is the one from Duels of the Planeswalkers, down $2.01 this week to $1.69. Now, of course, this was reprinted in Magic 2019, which is why it is standard legal. We saw these cards spike pretty aggressively last week, and we're seeing a lot of retraction this week. It's not that the card's not seeing play. Again, it's showing up in a lot of sideboards. The mono red aggro decks, which are very successful right now, not to mention some of these Boros midrange and aggro decks, they're all running this, because it is good against control, and control decks are leaving a bigger footprint recently. So the reason you're seeing the quick stabilization here is not only was this printed in Magic 2019, but it's been reprinted a number of times already. There's a lot of copies out there. People have them in their collections. As soon as they saw last week's spike, guess what? If they weren't using them, they started selling them off or selling them back to their stores or trading them, and you start to see a very quick retraction. Number 1, Crucible of Worlds. 2 versions here. 10th edition down $1.33 to $22.73. 5th Dawn down $2.51 to $27.49. Another card that is on our list because it was reprinted in Magic 2019, although that version of the card's a little more stable than these. But this is still very, very soft due to that reprinting, and I would say it's going to go down a little bit more, so wait, but very soon it will be a good time to pick this card up. It's a great casual card, and it sees a lot of play in Modern, even a little bit of Legacy play here or there. Now, in Modern, it's in some big decks right now. Sometimes it's just one of out of the board. Mono Green Tron, for example, you'll find it there. I have seen some Azorius Control decks running it out of the board. Most recently, though, the War of Invention decks, you'll find this right in the main there. All right, let's move on to the top 5 standard legal cards that have gained value this week. Number 5 is the Immortal Sun, up 96 cents to 14.76. This is a card that never quite took off in standard. Some of the vampire decks and such were trying to make it work, but it was always a good commander card. Part of the reason the price point is as high as it is. Now, recently, some of these Abzan mid-range decks are using this, and they do appear like they could be pretty decent decks. Not necessarily always top 8ing, but you are finding them sometimes coming in 9th, 10th, 11th in major tournaments. So this is a card you might want to keep an eye on, especially considering commander players are still going to back the price point of this quite a bit too. Number 4, Jade Light Ranger, up $1.22 to $15.57. This card has had a huge couple of weeks. I do think it's starting to reach its ceiling and might go up just a little bit more before it stabilizes and begins to come down a little bit. But it is a major part of this current meta as part of these Golgari mid-range decks, Abzan mid-range decks. And let's face it, Golgari looked great last weekend at the Star City Games Classic, coming in 1st, 7th, and 8th. Number 3, Rekindling Phoenix, goes up another $1.45 to $28.99. Last week I said I felt like this card would get around $30 and then stall out a little bit and start going down. I still think that's the case, but it is still seeing a lot of play. Again, let's refer back to the Star City Games Classic. The deck that came in 2nd place was Mono Red Aggro, running 4 of these things. You also saw these in a Boros mid-range deck that was in the top 8, a Boros Angels deck out of the sideboard that was in the top 8. So overall, this card's not going anywhere. But remember, a lot of people already have their copies. This is not a surprising card to standard players. A lot of folks had them from the past metas. So these will start to even out pretty soon. Number 2, Vivian Reed, up $1.87 to $24. Much like the last 2 cards we discussed, this one is very similar. It's going up and will probably go up just a little bit more. It's not going up as quickly as it was in previous weeks, but it is still seeing a lot of play, and it's going to be a big part of this meta going forward. Golgari mid-range decks especially. I saw a number of those running this right out of the main. You saw a lot of copies of her in the top 8 last weekend at the Star City Games Classic. And even the decks that aren't running her out of the main, many of the Golgari mid-range decks do use her in the sideboard instead. And there are other decks that utilize her out of the board pretty consistently. For example, Selesnya Tokens. I even saw an Elf deck kicking around doing that. So she's in a lot of places right now. Number 1, Carnage Tyrant, up $2.56 to $25.23. Have I mentioned how good Golgari mid-range decks are right now? After last weekend, so many people paying attention to that deck. And again, here's a card that was in the main of many of the builds. It's funny though, Golgari midrange does have some pretty drastically different builds. Some don't run this card at all. Some run them out of the side, some run them right in the main. But this is not like Banefire, where a lot of people were preparing for control decks by putting some of these in the sideboard. This is a key part of some of the Golgari midrange strategies, and because of which it's going up pretty aggressively this weekend. Again, much like many of the cards we talked about in this top 5, this will go up a little bit more before it stabilizes. This weekend is going to be a big weekend for Standard with the return of these Standard GPs. And because the Pro Tour is still a couple more weeks away, the Pro Tour is a little bit later this time, this is going to be the weekend where people are going to finally commit to a deck if they haven't already. You might see some wild price swings on certain cards that are successful this weekend, and you might see a little more activity when we do get to Pro Tour weekend. But after that, things will start to stabilize and calm down quite a bit. All right, let's move on to Modern, with your top 5 Modern legal cards that have lost value this week. Now, we had a Modern Open as well as a Modern Classic last weekend, so you're going to see that influence, especially when we look at the cards that are going up in value. First, though, number 5, Karn Liberated for Modern Masters 2015, down $1.86 to $89.99. This is just normal stabilization. Karn isn't going anywhere. As a matter of fact, a Mono Green Tron deck was in the top 8 of the Open last weekend. But this does feel like the card wants to sit around the $90 mark and probably will for the most part until it finally gets a reprint again. Number 4, Scalding Tarn from Zendikar, down $2.16 to $74.75. Again, some normal stabilization here for this particular card. It's a key part of a lot of big mana bases, not only in Modern but also Legacy. It is kind of interesting that the Dredge decks that were in the top 8 this past weekend of the Open, and one came in 2nd as well as 3rd, they weren't running this in their mana base. Maybe this is just a coincidence, but this does trend down at least a little bit this week. Number 3, Marsh Flats from Modern Masters 2017, down $2.18 this week to $42. Again, it's a fetch land. It's going to see play no matter what happens. But you might notice that Mardu Pyromancer is seeing a little less play recently, and this was one of the cards that was spiking when that deck was popular, so that could be part of the reason for the retraction here. Number 2, Mox Opal. Scars of Mirrodin goes down $2.95 to $100.79 with Modern Masters 2015, going down $3.31 to $100.34. This is very comparable to Karn, but actually sees more play than Karn. This is a popular card. It's not going anywhere. It's stabilizing down a little bit. Again, this is one of those cards that will sit around the $100, $105 mark until eventually someday we see a reprint. It's in so many big decks right now. Just to name a few off the top of my head, you have War of Invention, which is a little newer. You have some of the old standbys like Ironworks Combo, Affinity, Hardened Scales Affinity. The thing is everywhere. Number 1, Engineered Explosives, down $3.88 to $84.87. This is the Modern Masters version. Now, this card had a lot of aggressive spiking recently, so it was overdue for a little bit of a retraction. And this is a sideboard card for so many builds right now, but even beyond that, Ironworks Combo will run this right out of the main. Alright, let's move on to the top 5 modern legal cards that have gained value this week. Coming in at number 5 is a card that's moving because of Commander, not really because of Modern, but it's Sakashima the Imposter, up $1.32 to $22.99. This has been hot recently in the world of Commander due to a Trotta the Silencer coming out in Guilds of Ravnica. Number 4, Leyline of the Void from Magic 2011, going up $1.51 to $47.78. So I mentioned that Dredge had a pretty good weekend at the Open. Well, it came in second, came in third. Whenever Dredge does well, people start thinking about sideboarding against it, and guess what? Leyline of the Void always goes up in value. Eventually, it will settle back down again, but for right now, it's pretty hot. And also remember, Dredge decks will run this out of the sideboard typically to deal with mirror matchups. Number 3, well, you know Dredge had a good week. Life of the Loam shows up, 3 versions here. Dual Deck Izzet versus Golgari going up $1.23 to $19.99. Modern Masters going up $2.04 to $21.03. Ravnica City of Guilds going up $2.38 to $21.98. Not only is this great in Dredge, but also a part of 4-color Loam and Legacy, which is a very popular build right now and doing well. Number 2, Surgical Extraction from New Phyrexia, up $2.60 to $26.13. I feel like this card has been undervalued for a while now. It's a huge sideboard card for Modern as well as Legacy. And ever since this got reprinted in Modern Masters 2015, overall the pricing has been soft, but it's been a while since that reprint, and I do think this will continue to creep up. If you don't have your copies, you might want to grab them, although you never know when this could see a reprint. Number 1, Kragenwick Cremator. This goes up $3.86 this week to $6.04, and you look at this card and you're like, what is going on here? Is this some sort of Commander thing? No, it's actually a Modern thing. Now, a couple weeks ago at the Modern Challenge, we saw a Naya Monsters deck make it to the top 8 running 4 copies of this. Basically, it was using this to pitch some of the monsters if they couldn't cast them, like Ghalta Primal Hunger, or even Impervious Great Worm. That was actually kind of crazy. There were 2 copies of that in there. So obviously, that's going to draw a lot of attention as people began to try to build this deck. Now, this card in particular saw a spike because it is a Shadowmoor rare, and during that time period in Magic, there was a recession in the game and print runs were down a little bit, so these cards tend to get a little jumpy at times, and that's what happened here. Now, over the last 24-48 hours, this card has retracted, and I do think that's going to continue to happen to some degree, because this is another one of those cards people had in their collection, forgot about, they saw the spike and realized, wait a minute, I have some of these, I'm not using them, I'm going to sell them. So again, you're seeing a pretty quick snapback here, and I do think that will continue. Ultimately, the deck will have to put up a major result in a big tournament before I think people start to pay attention again. Okay, let's move on to our Vintage Spotlight. And again, the name of the game is Unlimited. Every card on our list today that we're going to spotlight is from the Unlimited set. And I've mentioned in previous videos now, the reason for that is Unlimited still had a low enough print run for it to matter when it comes to collectability. It's also still valid when it comes to 93-94 format. And sellers, especially online, can move these quicker than alpha and beta because a higher percentage of players can afford them. So let's see what we have here. First is Meekstone at $14.86 this week to $66.63, of course from Unlimited, as all these cards will be. And this one has been reprinted. It's not on the reserve list. There are cheaper copies out there. Balance. This one is actually banned in Legacy. It's also restricted in Vintage. It's not on the reserve list. It's been reprinted, but it's still going up $15.43 to $48.50 this week. Granite Gargoyle up $20.63 to $71.49. This is on the reserve list, but it did get reprinted and revised if you're looking for a cheaper copy. Armageddon up $21.60 to $116.99. Not on the reserve list and has been reprinted. Fork up 2364 to 9724. This one is on the reserve list, but much like Granite Gargoyle, was reprinted and revised. There is a cheaper copy out there. Verduran Enchantress is up $39.99 this week to $147.95. Not on the reserve list. It's been reprinted into Oblivion. You can find some cheap copies of this. So if you're a Commander player and you're looking to upgrade the Commander 2018 Adaptive Enchantment deck, don't pay for this one. You'll find a lot cheaper ones. Taiga, one of your cheaper unlimited dual lands, but it goes up $60.25 this week to $360.25. Of course, this is on the reserve list, but there are reprints of the dual lands and revised. They're still pretty expensive there, though, too. Okay, let's move on to our Commander Spotlight. Not a whole lot going on here this week. Now, Commander's a little bit slower, but that's to be expected. It doesn't mean people aren't playing Commander or anything. It just simply means that we're in a drought when it comes to new cards coming out, and new cards are the catalyst for people going to the secondary market to try to pick up old cards that interact well with the new ones, and that's why you see a lot of the Commander spikes like we've been seeing over the last few months. Right now, things are slow, though. We got two cards to look at, one of which is Gwendolyn de Corsai, up $296 to $139.25. This is a reserve list Legends card. It's not an amazing Commander card or anything, but I do like to point out these gold Legends when they go up in value because I know a lot of casual players do like to pick them up. And the last one is another Legends reserve list card. It's Angus McKenzie, up $740 to $238.99. Now, this one is a better Commander card. It's actually a pretty good pillow fort card. It's just very expensive. We don't have anything going on in Pauper this week, so that concludes the Market Watch. I do think there will be some movement this week in Standard with the GPs going on and also the Pro Tour in a couple weeks down the road. You might see a little more movement, but for the most part, things will be calming down because we're not going to see a lot of new cards revealed throughout November, December. So there will be some quiet in the market, I think. We'll have to see how that turns out, but it could be a good time to maybe pick up some cards that you've been putting off for a little bit. But until next time, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.